A night unraveled, it began with a soft groan, barely audible, but in a house where silence was the norm, it carried too far. I hadn't meant for it to escape, hadn't thought about Mom being downstairs scrolling through her tablet in the living room. Maybe I lost track of everything because Ethan's hand was pressed gently over my lips, his voice a low murmur in my ear, words tangled with promises as he moved with deliberate care. Maybe I let myself forget because it had been weeks since we'd stolen a moment like this, and I was desperate for it, for him. But when his hand slipped, when my groan slipped out and vibrated against the pillow, I heard it, a faint creak from the staircase. Then silence. Then footsteps, slow and measured, climbing closer. Ethan froze, his body still pressed against mine, his breath warm and uneven against my neck. We didn't dare move, as if holding still could erase the sound, could rewind the night. "He heard that?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely a breath. My pulse hammered in my chest, loud enough I swore it echoed in the room. I glanced at the door. Closed, but not locked. Another creak, sharper, right outside. Ethan slid away from me, reaching for his hoodie in the dark. "Fuck, Mia, fuck," he hissed under his breath. "Get dressed." I yanked the blanket up, my hands shaking as I tried to steady my breathing, my body still buzzing from the last half hour. My lips were tender from his kisses, my legs aching in a way that felt both thrilling and incriminating. Ethan stuffed his sneakers into his bag, his eyes darting to the door. "You didn't lock it?" he whispered, accusation lacing his tone. I shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. I hadn't thought we'd need to. I hadn't thought at all. Knock, knock. The sound stopped my heart. Ethan moved faster than I'd ever seen, slipping behind the closet door, his silhouette vanishing into the shadows. I clutched the blanket tighter, my mind racing for an excuse. "Mia?" The voice wasn't Mom's, my stomach twisted. It was her friend Claire, the one who'd been over for dinner, who'd stayed late to talk about work and sip wine. Her voice was calm but close, too close. "Yeah?" I managed, my voice cracking. "I'm fine, just sleeping." Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then the doorknob turned. I whispered Ethan's name, a panicked hiss, but he didn't respond. He was a statue behind the closet door, probably holding his breath, half-dressed and praying Claire would turn around and leave. The door eased open and light from the hallway sliced into the room. Claire stood there, tall and poised, her dark hair pulled back, still in the fitted sweater she'd worn earlier. Her eyes swept the room, sharp and unreadable, lingering on the tangled sheets, then on me. My hair was a mess, my breathing uneven, my face flushed. I forced a smile. "Just had a weird dream. Sorry if I was loud." She didn't smile back. Instead, she stepped inside, her boots soft against the hardwood, and closed the door behind her. The click of the latch felt like a trap snapping shut. My mouth went dry. I could hear Ethan's shallow breathing from the closet, faint but unmistakable. Claire's gaze flicked toward the sound, her brow furrowing slightly. She heard it too. "Everything okay in here?" she asked, her voice low, almost too casual. She took another step, her eyes scanning the room again, pausing at the closet. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. I pulled the blanket higher, covering my bare shoulders, and nodded. "Yeah, totally. Just startled myself awake, you know?" I laughed, but it came out brittle, unconvincing. Claire's lips pressed into a thin line, and she moved closer to the bed, her shadow stretching across the floor. I felt exposed, like she could see every secret written on my skin. "You sure?" she said, her tone sharper now. She glanced at the closet again, longer this time, and my stomach churned. Ethan wasn't moving, but I could feel his panic radiating from across the room. Claire's hand rested on the bedpost, her fingers tapping lightly, like she was thinking, weighing something. "I heard something," she said finally. "Thought I'd check." "It was probably just me," I said too quickly. Like I said, weird dream. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. Instead, she turned toward the closet, her steps deliberate. My breath caught as her hand reached for the handle. "Mind if I take a look?" she asked, but it wasn't a question. Not really. I opened my mouth to protest, but no words came. My mind was a blur of half-formed excuses, none of them good enough. Claire's hand closed around the knob, and I braced myself, waiting for the world to collapse. The door creaked as she pulled it open, revealing the cluttered mess of my clothes, shoes, and boxes. Ethan was tucked behind a row of hanging jackets, his outline barely visible in the dim light. Claire stared into the closet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I held my breath, praying she wouldn't step closer, wouldn't see the faint movement of his chest. Finally, she let go of the knob and turned back to me. "Get some rest, Mia," she said, her voice softer now, but there was something in her eyes, suspicion maybe, or something else I couldn't place. She crossed the room, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway. "Good night." The door clicked shut, and I exhaled, my body sagging against the headboard. Ethan didn't move, not yet. We waited, listening to the sound of Claire's footsteps retreating down the stairs. When the house was silent again, he slipped out from the closet, his face pale, his hoodie clutched in his hands. "That was too close," he whispered, pulling on his shoes. "I gotta go." I nodded, still shaken, my heart refusing to slow. "Yeah, go." He grabbed his bag and moved to the window, the one we'd used before when sneaking him in. He paused, looking back at me, his eyes soft but urgent. "We can't do this here again." "Not like this." "I know," I said, my voice barely audible. He climbed out, disappearing into the night, and I was left alone with the weight of what had almost happened. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel safe. Not anymore. I stared at the ceiling, my breath still ragged from what Alex and I had just done. The room smelled like sweat and his cheap aftershave, something citrusy that always lingered too long. He was sprawled beside me on the bed, grinning like an idiot, his hand tracing lazy circles on my thigh. "That was intense," he whispered, leaning in to kiss my neck. I nodded, but my mind was already drifting. My stepmom was downstairs watching TV, oblivious as always. She'd invited her old college buddy, Marcus, over for dinner earlier that evening. He was crashing on the couch for the night since he lived a couple hours away and didn't want to drive back late. Alex had climbed through my window like he always did, our little secret ritual. We weren't out to anyone yet, especially not my family. I was 19, fresh out of high school, and Alex was my neighbor's kid, same age, same hidden desires. But tonight felt riskier. Marcus had this way about him, tall, broad-shouldered, with a quiet intensity that made me uneasy. Like he could see through walls. We were tangled in the sheets when I heard the creak. The door! My heart slammed against my ribs. Alex froze mid-kiss, his eyes wide. "Shit," he mouthed. I shoved him toward the closet, yanking the blanket over myself just as the knob turned. The door swung open, and there he was. Marcus, silhouetted in the hallway light, holding a glass of water like he'd just come up for a drink. His eyes locked on me instantly. I was flushed, hair messed up, trying to play it cool. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Couldn't sleep?" I mumbled something about needing the bathroom, but my voice cracked. He didn't move, just stood there scanning the room. The closet door was ajar. Alex hadn't pulled it all the way shut. My pulse thundered in my ears. Marcus took a step inside, casual as hell, but his gaze flicked to the window. It was cracked open, the curtain fluttering slightly. "Hot night," he commented, sipping his water. I nodded, pulling the blanket higher. He lingered like he was waiting for me to crack. Then, without a word, he turned and headed back out. But before closing the door, he paused and looked over his shoulder. "Your stepmom's in the living room," he said softly. "Didn't hear a peep." I swallowed hard, forcing a weak smile. He walked closer now, his presence filling the room. Marcus was in his late 30s, built like he still hit the gym every day. Dark hair cropped short, a shadow of stubble on his jaw. His scent hit me, sandalwood and leather, earthy and commanding. My heart pounded louder. "You might want to lock up next time," he added, his tone almost amused. I laughed nervously. "Yeah, lesson learned." He was at the bedside now, looming over me. I couldn't meet his eyes fully. Up close, he was even more intimidating, those broad shoulders straining against his t-shirt. Then he leaned down, not too close, but enough that his breath brushed my ear. "Tell your buddy in the closet he should have checked the latch." My chest tightened like a vice. How the hell did he know? Marcus straightened up, his expression unreadable. Not anger, not judgment, something sharper, like intrigue. He walked to the door, but before stepping out, he glanced back. His eyes held mine for a beat too long, something flickering there that made my stomach twist. Then he shut the door softly behind him. I didn't move for what felt like forever. My body was still buzzing from earlier, but now it was mixed with fear. Finally, I bolted to the closet and flung it open. Alex tumbled out, pale as a ghost. "What the fuck was that?" he hissed. I shook my head, no words coming. He grabbed his clothes, planted a quick kiss on my lips, and slipped out the window into the night. I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the door. It wasn't just closed, it was locked. From the inside? No, he'd done it on his way out. How? Why? My mind raced. Was it to keep me safe, or to keep himself from coming back? Sleep evaded me that night. Every creak in the house made me jolt upright. I kept seeing Marcus in the doorway, tall, silent, those piercing eyes dissecting me. The way he'd looked at me wasn't paternal, wasn't friendly. It was knowing, like he'd peeled back a layer I didn't even know I had. And that whisper about the closet, it sent shivers down my spine. Part of me wondered if he'd been listening longer than he let on. Morning came too soon. I dragged myself downstairs, the smell of bacon and coffee pulling me in. My stepmom Lisa was at the stove humming some old tune. Marcus sat at the table, scrolling on his phone, looking every bit the relaxed guest. "Morning, Ethan," Lisa chirped, plating eggs. "Sleep well?" I muttered a yeah and sat down, avoiding Marcus's gaze. But I felt it, his eyes on me, brief but heavy. My skin prickled. Lisa bustled around, chatting about work, then excused herself to answer a phone call in the den. Suddenly, it was just us. The kitchen felt smaller, the air thicker. I poked at my food, heart racing. Marcus didn't speak at first. He just stared out the window at the backyard, sipping his coffee black. Then so quietly I almost missed it. "You latched the window after he left." My fork clattered against the plate. I looked up, meeting his eyes, dark brown, unflinching. I nodded slowly. "Habit." He didn't smile, didn't react much. Just reached for a napkin and wiped his mouth. "Clever," he said, the word hanging in the air like smoke. It didn't sound like praise. It sounded like a challenge, or maybe an invitation. Lisa came back then, laughing about whatever was on the line, shattering the tension. But I was rattled. Marcus's voice echoed in my head all morning. Clever. Why did it feel like he was testing me? The day dragged on. Lisa had to run to the store for groceries, leaving Marcus to fix that leaky faucet in the bathroom she'd been nagging about. "Won't take long," she said, kissing my cheek on her way out. "You two behave." The door clicked shut, and the house went silent. I retreated to my room upstairs, blasting music through my headphones to drown out my thoughts. But 30 minutes later, a knock echoed, firm, deliberate. I yanked off the headphones. "Yeah? It's Marcus." His voice was muffled through the wood, but steady. I froze, my hand hovering over the knob. "Can we talk?" Another pause. "I'm not barging in this time." My pulse quickened. I opened the door a sliver, peeking out. He stood there in jeans and a faded black tee, arms crossed, looking almost casual. But his eyes roamed, taking in my rumpled shirt, the way my hair stuck up from running my hands through it. "You okay?" he asked, genuine concern lacing his tone. I nodded, but my voice betrayed me. "Fine," he sighed, glancing down the hall like he was choosing his words carefully. "About last night. I shouldn't have just walked in." My breath hitched. Here it came. "I saw what I saw," he continued, his voice dropping. I whispered back, "Please don't tell Lisa." He shook his head. "I'm not telling anyone. Not to cover for you, though." He stepped closer, the space between us shrinking. The air hummed with unspoken things. "Because I can't stop replaying it." My world tilted. "What?" His eyes bored into mine, intense, hungry. "You called out his name?" he murmured, leaning in so close I could feel the heat from his body. "But your eyes, they were on the door. Like you were waiting for it to open." My knees buckled slightly. He wasn't wrong. In that split second when the knob turned, a thrill had shot through me. Not just fear, but something electric. Being caught, exposed? By him, I couldn't form words. My lips parted, but nothing came out. Marcus pulled back then, his face composing itself into that calm mask. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything," he said, turning away. But as he walked down the stairs, I caught the slightest smirk. I slammed the door, leaning against it, my body betraying me with a rush of heat. I should have yelled, told him to fuck off, that he was twisted for even thinking that. But deep down, I knew he was right. That moment of intrusion had ignited something in me, a forbidden spark. The afternoon blurred into evening. Lisa returned with bags of groceries, chattering about dinner plans. Marcus helped unload, all smiles and small talk like nothing had happened. But every time our eyes met across the kitchen, it was there. That pull, that secret shared glance. I excused myself early, claiming homework. But really, I just needed space. Up in my room, I paced, replaying every word, every look. Why did his presence make my skin tingle? He was Lisa's friend, older, straight as far as I knew. But the way he'd whispered, it didn't feel straight. Night fell. Lisa crashed early. She always did after a long day. I heard her snoring faintly from down the hall. Marcus was supposedly on the couch, but I could hear faint noises from the living room, the creak of floorboards, the soft click of the TV remote. My mind wouldn't shut off. That spark from earlier had grown into a fire, restless and insistent. I tossed in bed, sheets tangling around me. Around midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped downstairs barefoot, telling myself I just needed water. The house was dark, save for the glow from the TV. Marcus was there, lounging on the couch in boxers and a tank top, a beer in hand. He looked up as I entered, not surprised. "Can't sleep?" he asked, muting the screen. I shook my head, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. But instead of filling it, I turned to face him. "What did you mean earlier?" "About replaying it?" My voice was barely above a whisper. He set the beer down, standing up slowly. He towered over me, that same scent enveloping us. "You know what I meant, Ethan." He stepped closer, the distance closing until I could see the pulse in his neck. "You like the risk." "The eyes on you." I swallowed, my back against the counter. "And you?" I challenged, my voice steadier than I felt. "What about you?" He paused. I swallowed, my back against the counter. And you? I challenged, my voice steadier than I felt. What about you? He paused, then reached out, his hand brushing my arm, light but electric. I liked watching, he admitted, his voice rough. More than I should. The air crackled. I could have pulled away, gone back upstairs. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned in, our breaths mingling. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer. Tell me to stop, he murmured. I didn't. Our lips met, hesitant at first, then urgent. His stubble scraped my skin, his grip firm. We stumbled toward the couch, clothes shedding in a haze. It was reckless, forbidden. Lisa upstairs, the risk of her waking. But that's what made it burn. Marcus's hands explored, his whispers in my ear echoing what he'd said before. You want this. The danger. And he was right. Again. Morning light filtered in. Lisa was up early making coffee. Marcus and I sat at the table, acting normal, but the glances we shared said otherwise. This was just the beginning, a secret deeper than the one with Alex. And as Lisa chatted obliviously, I realized I didn't want it to end. The thrill, the tension, it was addictive. Marcus caught my eye one last time, a promise in his gaze. Clever indeed. Forbidden heat. The air was thick with the weight of what he'd seen. Lucas stood in the dim glow of the garage, his broad shoulders hunched over a toolbox he was pretending to organize. His voice when he spoke was low, deliberate, like he was measuring every word. Couldn't sleep, Emma? He asked, not turning around. His hands kept moving, sorting wrenches that were already in perfect order. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, trying to look casual. Didn't try, I admitted, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. My heart was already racing, betraying the calm I was trying to project. It was 11:52 p.m., and I'd told myself I was just grabbing a glass of water when I left my room. But my feet had brought me here, to the garage, to him. Lucas paused, his fingers lingering on a screwdriver. You're bold, he said, finally glancing over his shoulder. His hazel eyes locked onto mine, sharp and unreadable. Coming out here alone. I'm not scared of you, I said, and the words felt like a challenge, hanging heavy in the air. He turned fully now, his gaze pinning me in place. Maybe you should be. His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, something dark and unguarded. My breath caught, but I didn't move. I couldn't. The garage felt smaller, the air hotter, like the walls were closing in around us. I took a step closer, my bare feet silent on the concrete floor. You're the one who came into my room last night, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You started this. Lucas let out a low, bitter chuckle, shaking his head. I walked in to stop something your father wouldn't have been okay with, he muttered, his jaw tight. You were with that guy, Nick. I saw you. But you didn't stop it, I said, stepping even closer. Our voices were so low now, like we were afraid the walls could hear. You stayed. You hid in the closet. You watched. His whole body went still, like I'd struck him. For a moment I thought he'd deny it, that he'd push me away and pretend it never happened. But he didn't. He turned slowly, his eyes burning into mine. We were so close now, I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell with each measured breath. I shouldn't have, he said, his voice rough, like it hurt to admit. I should have walked away. But you didn't, I whispered, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. You watched me. Lucas's jaw clenched, and for a second I thought he might turn away, end this before it could start. But then he spoke, his voice so low it sent a shiver down my spine. You know how long I've been coming to this house, Emma? Watching you grow up, telling myself not to notice the way you've changed? Trying to pretend you're still just my best friend's kid? My whole body tensed, heat flooding my face. I couldn't look away from him, couldn't breathe properly. Then stop pretending, I said, barely audible. The silence that followed was suffocating, pressing against my chest like a physical weight. Lucas's eyes darkened, his breath uneven. Then, in one swift motion, he reached past me and locked the garage door. The click echoed in the quiet, sharp, and final. I didn't move, didn't dare breathe. He stepped closer, and my back hit the edge of the workbench, the cold metal biting into my skin through my thin shirt. "Say stop," he whispered, his voice raw, almost pleading. "Say it right now, Emma." I didn't, I couldn't. My lips parted, but no words came out. His eyes searched mine like he was waiting for me to pull back, to run. But I didn't. So he leaned in, his breath warm against my skin. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking on my name. Still, I didn't speak. His hand moved slow and deliberate, his fingers brushing up my arm, so light it felt like fire trailing across my skin. I trembled, my knees threatening to give out. His hand stopped at my jaw, his thumb grazing the edge of my lip. "Your dad would kill me," he murmured, his voice barely holding together. I nodded, my throat tight. "Then don't let him find out. That was it." The dam broke. His lips crashed into mine, hard and desperate, like he was trying to pour every second of pent-up tension into that kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was raw, messy, full of everything we'd been holding back. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer, and I gripped his shirt, my fingers digging into the fabric as I kissed him back just as fiercely. It was like I'd been starving for this for him. Longer than I'd ever admitted to myself. His lips moved to my neck, trailing heat that made my head tip back against the workbench. "I shouldn't," he whispered against my skin, his voice thick with guilt. "But you want to," I gasped, my hands tugging him closer. He groaned, low and guttural, his hands tightening on my waist. One hand slipped under my shirt, his fingers splaying across my bare skin, and I arched into him, my breath coming in short, shaky bursts. He paused at the waistband of my shorts, his fingers hovering there, not crossing the line. "This doesn't go further," he said, his voice firm but strained. "Not tonight," I nodded, breathless, my head spinning. "Not yet." He kissed me again, harder this time, like he was trying to burn the moment into both of us. When he finally pulled back, my lips were swollen, my body trembling. He looked at me, his eyes dark and conflicted, like he was angry at himself, at me, at everything. Then without a word, he turned, unlocked the door, and walked out, leaving me standing there, heart racing, body aching, wanting more. For 3 days. I avoided Lucas. I couldn't look at him. Couldn't think about him without feeling dizzy, ashamed, and desperate all at once. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the garage. Felt his hands on me, his lips against mine. I was terrified, not just of my dad finding out, but of how much I wanted it to happen again. How much I wanted him. But I didn't have to wait long. On Thursday, my dad invited Lucas over for dinner, like it was just another night. Lucas had been coming over for years. My dad's best friend since college, the guy who'd been at every barbecue, every birthday, every milestone. So why would this time be different? Because now I knew the taste of his mouth. Because now my body still burned from where he'd touched me. I told myself I'd stay in my room, keep my distance, act like nothing had happened. But by 7:30, I was downstairs, unable to stay away. Lucas was already at the dining table, laughing with my dad, his deep voice filling the room. He was wearing a fitted navy sweater that clung to his arms and chest in a way that made it impossible to ignore him. I walked past, eyes glued to my phone, pretending I didn't notice him. "Hey, kid," Lucas said, his voice casual, like nothing had ever happened. I glanced up, just for a second, and caught the look in his eyes. It wasn't casual. It wasn't friendly. It was the kind of look that made my stomach flip and my mouth go dry. I nodded quickly and kept walking, heading for the kitchen. "Emma, grab the red wine from the top shelf, will you?" My dad called after me. Of course, it was on the highest shelf. Of course, Lucas followed me. I didn't hear him come in, but I felt him. The air shifted, grew heavier as I stretched up to reach the bottle. His hand brushed the small of my back, so light I might have imagined it, but my whole body reacted, a shiver racing through me. I nearly dropped the bottle. "You're shaking," he murmured, his voice so low it was almost a growl. "Don't," I whispered, my voice trembling. "He's right there." "I know," Lucas said, stepping closer. His breath grazed my ear, warm and deliberate. "I haven't stopped thinking about you." My grip tightened on the bottle, my heart pounding so hard I was sure my dad would hear it from the dining room. "Lucas," I breathed, half warning, half plea. He didn't touch me again, but he didn't move away either. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like frustration. "Walking around like that, pretending you don't know what you're doing to me?" I turned to face him. The bottle clutched to my chest like a shield. "I'm not doing anything," I said, but my voice betrayed me, shaky and unconvincing. His eyes darkened, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me right there, with my dad in the next room. But then he stepped back, his jaw tight, and grabbed a glass from the counter. "Better get that wine to your dad," he said, his voice low and controlled, like he was forcing himself to walk away. I stood there frozen, my heart racing, the bottle still pressed against my chest. When I finally carried it back to the dining room, my hands were still trembling. Lucas was already back at the table, laughing with my dad like nothing had happened. But when I sat down across from him, his eyes met mine, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. "Thinking about your lips," he murmured. I went rigid. A rush of warmth pooled in my belly, spreading downward. He pulled away just in time, right as my stepdad entered the living room. "All set here?" my stepdad asked, glancing between us. Marcus flashed a seamless grin. "Just grabbing that book from the high shelf for her. She's grown into quite the reacher these days." My stepdad laughed heartily. "Must take after her aunt's side of the family. Tall genes, skipping a generation." I managed a weak smile, but my pulse was thundering in my ears. Breathing felt impossible. My mind was a whirlwind. The evening meal dragged on like an eternity. Marcus positioned himself directly opposite me at the dining table, the picture of composure, while I fought to hold his gaze without replaying the husky timbre of his words echoing in my head. His shoe brushed against my ankle beneath the tablecloth. I dismissed it as a mishap and shifted away. It happened again, deliberate this time. I remained statue still. My stepdad was oblivious, chattering away about local politics, his latest fishing trip, and how Marcus was eyeing a new venture in real estate development. Marcus hardly spared me another glance until my stepdad excused himself to take a work call in his study. Then he inclined forward ever so slightly. "Planning to act like it didn't affect you?" he whispered, his stare locking onto mine with intensity. I stayed silent. "Because the way you responded, it screamed desire." I swallowed thickly. "Stop this. Convince me you didn't crave more." I couldn't find the words. His fingers drifted under the table, not making contact, merely hovering at the boundary. I sense it in you too, he added. My teeth ground together. I rose abruptly. I'm finished with dinner. I fled the table and retreated to my bedroom, my knees threatening to buckle with each step. I understood his game. He was probing my limits, anticipating the moment I'd yield. Roughly an hour ticked by before a soft rap sounded at my door. Once, then again. I ignored it, fixated on the knob, my chest constricted, my body thrumming with conflicting urges, yearning and denial clashing fiercely. No one pushed the door open. No sly enticements followed, only quiet. Then a slip of paper glided beneath the threshold. My breath hitched. I eyed the creased note on the carpet as if it were a live wire. When I finally retrieved it, Marcus's bold script stared back. Next time, admit it. I didn't respond, not via message, not verbally, but I didn't discard it either. I tucked it away in my nightstand drawer. Night after night, I'd unfold it and reread those words. Next time, admit it. Despite my vows to resist, to halt any progression, I found myself secretly yearning for another encounter. The following Thursday evening, my stepdad hosted a barbecue for his old college buddies in the backyard. Marcus arrived fashionably late, clad in fitted chinos and a navy button-down that accentuated his broad shoulders. I overheard his booming laughter from the patio, ribbing my stepdad as if the world were perfectly ordinary. But when I ventured out for a drink from the cooler, he pivoted toward me, his expression devoid of mirth. Just a penetrating gaze that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't benign. It wasn't platonic. It was laden with intent. By around midnight, the gathering wound down, the final guests departing amid backslaps and promises of future get-togethers. I lay motionless in bed, room shrouded in darkness, willing myself to stillness. My door stood shut, unlocked. Deep down, I recognized I was anticipating something, someone. Time stretched interminably. Another hour elapsed. Then the telltale creak of floorboards approached, resolute and recognizable, halting just beyond my door. I could almost sense his presence radiating through the wood. I ought to have spoken up, secured the lock, put an end to it. Yet I remained silent. The handle turned with a faint squeak. Marcus entered without preamble, sealing the door behind him and engaging the lock with a decisive snap. The space was dim, illuminated solely by the silvery glow of the street lamp filtering through the blinds. It highlighted his chiseled features, strong cheekbones, shadowed eyes, that unwavering stare declaring indifference to propriety, mirroring my own buried sentiments. He advanced unhurriedly to the bedside, pausing mere inches away. His tone was hushed. "You ignored the note." My words emerged hoarse. "You didn't offer an option." Marcus lowered himself onto the mattress's edge. "Did you desire one?" My respiration faltered. "I'm unsure of my desires," I breathed. He shifted closer, his proximity electric. "Oh, you are." His palm cupped my chin tenderly, angling my face to meet his. "I've observed you deceiving yourself these past months," he said. "But your reactions betray the truth." Tremors coursed through me. "Marcus." "Command me to cease." The plea went unuttered. He bridged the gap, claiming my lips, and this time resistance evaporated. Unlike the impulsive frenzy of our prior stolen moment in the garage weeks ago, triggered by a heated argument turning physical, this was languid, scorching, purposeful. He savored me as if committing every nuance to memory, as though the weight had been agonizing. His fingers trailed to my hips, bunching my tank top upward. I offered no opposition, allowing it to be discarded overhead. He paused, drinking in the sight of me exposed. Then he descended, trailing kisses across my shoulder, throat, décolletage, his exhalations ragged, touch assured yet reverent. You can't fathom how profoundly I've craved this, he growled against my flesh. You're my stepdad's closest ally, I murmured. This is forbidden. Irrelevant now, he interjected, his gaze searing. You willed me to appear that evening. He was accurate. I had, and the hunger intensified. He drew back the sheets, positioning himself above me. Our forms melded, warmth fusing with warmth, bare against bare. He captured my mouth anew, more profoundly, a primal rumble escaping him as restraint frayed. His palm ventured southward along my torso, hesitating at my pajama bottom's hem. He met my eyes. Final opportunity. Voice it, he urged softly. Affirm it. I withheld verbal consent, instead arching upward. That sufficed. Silence enveloped us thereafter, save for shared breaths and muffled sounds. He evoked sensations unparalleled, eclipsing even those with my girlfriend, Lena. It transcended mere physicality. It was voracious need, utter capitulation, taboo. Yet in the obscurity, his frame aligned with mine, his lips stifling my cries, it embodied perfection. We concluded entwined, breathless, pulses sinking, his embrace unyielding as if release were unthinkable. I permitted him to linger, dozing beside me in the space once shared with Lena. Consequences faded. Dawn arrived and he had vanished. My stepdad, too. The sole remnant, a message from Lena. We have to discuss this. I suspect your stepdad's aware. Seeing Lena's notification ignited dread. We have to discuss this. I suspect your stepdad's aware. My heart pounded erratically. The sheets retained residual heat where Marcus had lain, but no evidence lingered. No farewell, no digital trail, nothing to betray his nocturnal visit. I bolted upright, donned a robe, and crept downstairs. The home echoed with emptiness. My stepdad's truck absent from the driveway. No scribbled memo on the fridge. No half-drunk tea on the island. No customary hum of the radio. Unease gnawed deeper. I fired back to Lena. What implies he knows? Silence. My call diverted to voicemail. Anxiety surged. What had my stepdad witnessed? Overheard? Had he intruded amid our fervor, drowned out by passion? We'd been cautious, the lock engaged, Marcus departing pre-dawn. Unless slumber evaded him. Unless Marcus confessed, minutes blurred into hours. Lena remained unresponsive. Restlessness consumed me. Pacing the halls, replaying scenarios. Worst-case visions assaulted. My stepdad confronting Marcus at dawn, a heated altercation erupting, secrets unraveling. Or perhaps he'd eavesdropped from the hall, piecing together the puzzle of muffled gasps and creaking springs. Shame mingled with lingering afterglow, a toxic brew. By midday, desperation peaked. I dialed my stepdad, voicemail. Marcus's line rang endlessly. Isolation amplified paranoia. Had they convened without me? Was Lena entangled somehow, perhaps spotting something during a prior visit? Memories flooded, that initial spark months back, when Marcus, post-divorce, crashed on our couch after a night out with my stepdad. I'd fetched him water at 2 a.m., our fingers brushing, igniting unspoken tension. Lingering glances evolved into flirtatious banter, culminating in that garage clinch. Now escalation threatened exposure. Afternoon waned. A car engine rumbled outside. Peering through curtains, I spied my stepdad's truck. He entered solo, expression stormy. "We need to chat," he declared, voice edged. My throat constricted. "About what?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Lena called me this morning. Said she saw Marcus leaving your room at dawn. Is it true?" Denial teetered on my lips, but his gaze pierced. Tears welled. "It's complicated." Anger flashed, then softened to hurt. "He's my best friend." "You're like a daughter to me. It's betrayal. Hours of confrontation ensued, accusations, explanations, raw emotions. Marcus arrived later, summoned. Tensions boiled, shouts, revelations. He admitted the affair, claiming genuine feelings. My stepdad oscillated between fury and heartbreak. Lena, it transpired, had driven by early, suspicious after my distant behavior. The fallout? Fractured bonds. My stepdad distanced himself from Marcus, our home fractured. Lena ended things, wounded. Yet amid chaos, Marcus and I stole moments, our connection deepening despite peril. Forbidden flames burned brighter, but at what cost? Weeks morph. Burned brighter, but at what cost? Weeks morphed into tentative reconciliation, therapy sessions, awkward dinners. My stepdad grappled with acceptance. Marcus proved commitment. Eventually, uneasy peace settled, but the scar lingered, a reminder that desire, unchecked, reshapes lives irrevocably. A tangled heart. The knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts, sharp and insistent, like a crack in the quiet of the night. I bolted downstairs, my bare feet slapping against the cold wooden steps, and yanked the door open. Standing there was Ethan, his face pale, his jaw tight, his green eyes burning with something raw and heavy. I knew that look. He knew. My stomach twisted as I stepped aside, letting him in without a word. We climbed the stairs to my room in silence, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Ethan didn't sit when we got there. He stood by the window, hands shoved deep in his jean pockets, his gaze flickering over my cluttered desk, my unmade bed, anywhere but me. Finally he spoke, his voice low, almost too calm. "I swung by your place last night to drop off your jacket. Thought you'd left it at my place after the party." My throat tightened, dry as sandpaper. I didn't respond, just stood there, waiting for the axe to fall. "I knocked," he went on, his words deliberate, like he was piecing together a puzzle he didn't want to solve. No one answered. "Your window was shut, blinds down. I figured you were asleep." He paused, his eyes finally meeting mine, sharp and glassy. Then I saw him. "Your dad's buddy Marcus, climbing out your window like some kid sneaking out past curfew." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. My heart thudded so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Ethan?" I started, but my voice cracked, betraying me. "You lied to me, Lucas," he said, his voice breaking now, raw with hurt. "This whole time you've been lying. I knew something was off. I felt it, but him? Marcus?" He shook his head like he was trying to shake the image out of his mind. "How long's it been going on?" I swallowed, my mouth dry, my mind scrambling for something to say that wouldn't make this worse. "I don't know," I whispered. "It just happened," Ethan laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "It just happened?" "You're with me, Lucas. Or you were supposed to be." His voice softened, but it wasn't gentle. It was defeated. "You were with me," I tried to explain, the words tumbling out in a mess. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It wasn't planned, it just— Marcus, he—" I stopped, because how could I explain what I didn't fully understand myself? The way Marcus looked at me, the way his touch lit something inside me I didn't know was there. The way I let it happen again and again, even knowing it was wrong. Ethan stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe he didn't. I barely recognized myself. "You're not who I thought you were," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then he turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. I didn't chase him. I couldn't. I sank onto the edge of my bed, my chest tight, tears stinging my eyes but refusing to fall. Everything was unraveling, and I had no one to blame but myself. Later that evening, Dad came home. He moved through the house like a storm cloud, heavy and silent. He didn't say much, just grabbed a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter, his eyes flicking to me as I stood in the kitchen doorway. I could feel it, the weight of his suspicion, like a wall between us. "Marcus won't be coming around anymore," he said suddenly, his voice flat, like he was stating a fact about the weather. He didn't look at me, just stared at the bottle in his hand. I froze. "What?" He took a slow sip, his jaw tight. "He said he needs space. Said he's got some personal stuff to deal with." He paused, his eyes finally meeting mine, and I saw it, disappointment, maybe even betrayal, flickering in his gaze. "I don't know what happened, Lucas, but I know something did." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. What could I say? That I'd let his best friend Marcus cross lines that should have stayed untouched? That I'd felt something shift in me the first time Marcus's hand brushed mine, his voice low and warm, pulling me into something I couldn't resist? That I'd let him into my room, into my bed, where Ethan used to hold me? There was no version of that truth that wouldn't destroy everything. "I understand," I managed, my voice barely audible. Dad didn't say anything else, just turned and walked down the hall, leaving me standing there, the silence louder than any words. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed, staring at my phone, willing it to light up with a message from Marcus. A call, a text, anything to prove I hadn't imagined it all. At 3:17 a.m., it finally buzzed. One message: "Come outside." I stumbled to the window, my heart racing. There he was, leaning against his beat-up truck, hoodie pulled up, arms crossed like he was trying to hold himself together. I slipped on my shoes, crept downstairs, and stepped out into the cool night air. Each step toward him felt heavier, my chest aching with a mix of dread and need. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, his dark eyes unreadable under the streetlight. "You okay?" he finally asked, his voice low. I shook my head, my throat tight. "I told Ethan I can't see him anymore. I broke up with him." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. "And your dad?" "He knows something's up." "He didn't say it, but I can tell." "He said you're not coming around anymore." Marcus nodded, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I told him I needed space. Didn't want to make things worse for you." "Worse?" I laughed, but it came out bitter. "I ruined everything, Marcus. Ethan, my dad, you." My voice cracked, and I hated how small it sounded. "I don't even know who I am anymore." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne, feel the warmth of him despite the chilly night. "You didn't ruin me," he said softly. "You're not the only one who let this happen." I looked up at him, my eyes burning. "I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't want you." "But you do," he said. Not a question, just a quiet truth. I nodded, my breath shaky. "I do." For a moment we just stood there, the world silent except for the faint hum of crickets and the distant bark of a dog. Then, without thinking, or maybe thinking too much, I closed the distance between us. My lips found his, desperate and reckless, in the middle of the empty street. His hands cupped my face, his kiss fierce, like he was pouring everything he couldn't say into it. It wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about the ache in my chest, the pull I couldn't fight, the need that consumed me. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, our breaths mingling in the cold air. "What now?" I whispered. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I'm not walking away from this." Not yet. The days that followed were a blur of tension and secrets. Dad barely spoke to me, his silence louder than any lecture. Ethan didn't text, didn't call, didn't show up. I saw him once at school, his eyes skimming over me like I was a stranger. It hurt, but I couldn't blame him. I'd broken something between us that couldn't be fixed. Marcus and I met in stolen moments, late nights in his truck, quiet corners of the park, anywhere we could be alone. Every touch, every whispered word, felt like a rebellion against the world that told us this was wrong. But it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the only thing keeping me tethered to myself. One night, as we sat in his truck, the windows fogged from our breath, he took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. "This can't last forever, you know," he said, his voice heavy. "Your dad, this town, they'll tear us apart." I squeezed his hand, my chest tight. "Then we'll leave. Go somewhere no one knows us." He smiled, but it was sad, like he knew it was a dream we couldn't chase. "You're young, Lucas. You've got a whole life ahead of you." "I'm just a complication." "You're more than that," I said fiercely. "You're the only thing that feels real right now." He kissed me then, slow and deep, and for a moment I believed we could make it work. But deep down I knew he was right. This wasn't a story with a neat ending. It was messy, painful, and beautiful, all at once. And so we kept going, stealing moments where we could, knowing each one might be our last. Because sometimes love isn't about forever. Sometimes it's about holding on as tight as you can, for as long as you can, before the world pulls you apart.